Carrie's so nice. That was really a cue for me to stop yakking and get up here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Bob Harvey. I'm the president and CEO of the partnership. I see a number of familiar faces, but not all of you, so thank you all for coming. We characterize this as the first in a series of workshops on getting back to business following Hurricane Harvey. I really appreciate those of you who've made this event possible, as well as those of you who really came for the information that will be shared today. This is all about rebuilding our region, getting business restarted, which I think has largely taken place. We have a number of breakout sessions planned. We have a business expo outside that you probably saw coming in. Quite a few of our members have offered their services and things directly connected with rebuilding and offering office space and temporary staffing and legal support and insurance support. So we appreciate our members who've stepped forward to be part of this business expo as well. Now, as we all know, the hurricane, with a name like Harvey, I just say the hurricane. I've decided I'm going to call it the hurricane. No one else has gone along with that, I must admit. But the hurricane clearly wreaked havoc across Texas, and I tend to think of it as kind of three broad geographic areas. Rockport up to Victoria, of course, Corpus. They were impacted by the full force of a hurricane that in some respects moved through fairly quickly, though did incredible damage, particularly in Rockport. And then, of course, there was that storm that came and lingered over Houston for days and days, and that's really what we're here largely to talk about. And then, of course, that storm continued to move east and hit the Golden Triangle, in a different way. In many ways, similar to Houston, but it's a different community, and therefore the result was different. So we may have people here from across that entire swath, but I tend to think of the greater Houston area as being the focal point of certainly what we do at the partnership and in this discussion. But that's not to take anything away from these other communities that were hit very hard. Now, this program is about restoring business, rebuilding our business and our economy. But I must say, this storm uniquely, really, relative to other hurricanes I've witnessed, I'm a native Houstonian, and many of you perhaps are. You've certainly been around Houston long enough to see multiple hurricanes. Most hurricanes do, with their wind damage or storm surge, they do more or less equal damage to businesses and to homes. Our storm really was largely focused on a residential housing stock, right? 150,000 houses were significantly damaged by the storm just in the greater Houston area, we believe. We're still looking for estimates. Patrick may share estimates how many of those homes were destroyed. But it's measured in the tens of thousands, probably 30 or 40,000. So this event largely hit people in their homes. A lot of the rebuilding will have to do with rebuilding people's lives and property. But there were businesses impacted. The good news on the business front is that business quickly returned to business. We estimate among our members, 90% of our members appear to have been back to work by that Tuesday after Labor Day, September 5th. That's an extraordinarily high percentage when you think about the magnitude of the event the prior week. At least half of that 90% was actually back to work the previous week. They were back to work Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, which is pretty amazing. But fully 90% were back to work by Tuesday. Now, the other 10% were frankly those businesses that were underwater. The concentration of business impacts, certainly for large business, is pretty easily described as that group around the energy corridor, particularly around Eldridge, that narrow geography. There is a group, some along 610, obviously some businesses along 610 that were impacted hard. The northwest side, 249, I still call it the old Compact campus, were hit pretty hard. Businesses up around Kingwood, but that was largely residential, not business. So really concentrations of business impact, and those businesses, some of them, as you know, have a pretty long-term road to recovery. Across the entire office space of Houston, we think perhaps 97 to 98% of office space made it through this storm okay. That means 2 to 3% didn't. And again, that's very concentrated. I could probably name the buildings. So again, a unique storm. Now, small business, and many of you represent at least a small to mid-sized segment of the business, we're not quite sure where they fall. The data doesn't crisply pick that up. We're getting some of this information from the Texas Department of Public Safety, so we're getting a bit of a handle on it. But we think small business is probably somewhere in between. We think it's more like big business in terms of how it was impacted, but a lot of small business exists closer to neighborhoods out in the retail strip centers and things of that sort. So we're not entirely certain on that. That's why, though, this program I think of as being targeted at small to medium business in many respects. Coming back to the storm itself and the days immediately following the storm, it was a remarkable demonstration of what we all hold dear about Houston. We market Houston, right, as the partnership. We market it around the country and around the world, and we make statements like we're a remarkably diverse city. We're a remarkably warm and welcoming city. We're a remarkably inclusive city. We say all that, and people give us that look like, yeah, right, But we showed in Houston throughout that period of rescue and recovery how true all that was. The images that were projected, and we've seen that now in the national media and the feedback we've gotten at the partnership. We think what the world saw were people being rescued in a flood, but what they really saw was a community that came out and helped each other. We always say neighbor helping neighbor, which isn't that surprising. Always say stranger helping stranger is more surprising. And then most surprising of all as a native Texan is Cajuns helping Texans. So I'm still, and I have to admit, I'm still trying to get my head around that last piece. But that view, and one person put it this way, what I saw in Houston was the workforce I wish I had. And it was like a strange juxtaposition. What they were seeing happening in the streets and how people were taking charge personally, helping each other, just doing what needed to be done, not seeking credit. They made the leap to, hey, that's what we all aspire to have in our workforce. And it was just interesting because I'm sitting there thinking about the details, how high was the water and this, that, and the other, and people see through that and they see something quite different. There are a lot of hometown heroes, and I do try to give credit, particularly to Mayor Turner and County Judge Emmett. In my role at the partnership, I'll say this. I guess this is being live streamed, so I have to be a little bit more careful. The partnership plays a role vis-a-vis the elected leadership, one of support, but also one of tension, right? Because we're not always on the same side on every issue. But what a remarkable demonstration of civic leadership than to have our mayor and our judge out there day after day after day, kind of doing what needed to be done, working together as they needed to work together to make that process work. So I'm very proud of that, and I could go on a lot of other elected officials beyond just the two of them. I'm also very proud of how business has responded post the event. There's been some great coverage of all that business is doing. There was a Wall Street Journal story that just took the time to talk about how many of our employers, how they were working with their own employees, giving them time off to deal with their own issues, giving them time off to help fellow employees. Then I thought most remarkable, even when they went back to work, giving their employees time off to just go out and help and volunteer in the community. That was kind of the three-part. You could volunteer for your own house, you could volunteer for a fellow employee, or frankly, if you just want to go help at NRG Center or GRB or wherever, feel free to do that. So I was pleased with that response. We've also seen a lot of emergency funds established during the storm. We haven't seen that before. There's a feature in the tax code where you can create a tax-advantaged fund, and both employees and employers can put money in that fund, and that money can be distributed on a tax-advantaged basis. And we've seen a lot of those funds set up across Houston. People that hadn't considered doing that have done so. To put in a plug for the Greater Houston Community Foundation, it's really not a plug because they've been so overwhelmed with people calling them to set up these accounts. I'm not sure they want me out there talking about them. But the Community Foundation, of course, will set up those accounts for you. We had our own story. I was interacting with Richard Carranza, Dr. Carranza, the superintendent at HISD. He's only been here a year, so I kind of called him to say, this is what a hurricane is. I don't know if he appreciated me calling for that purpose. But we had a great conversation. I said, how can the business community help? It's in our interest for you to get those schools open. It's in all of our interest to get those kids back in school. We can't get back to any sense of normalcy until that happens. And we talked about a whole range of issues about how the business community could help. But in that first phone call, he said, let me get the CIO on the phone with us. And we kept talking. And he said, my real problem is I've got electronic equipment in 288 schools at HISD. I've got switches and routers and distributed equipment throughout those schools. There is no way I can get into those schools and check all that equipment with the team I have. And there's no way I can open the schools unless I know that equipment's working. So we called, Umesh Verma is on our board. Some of you know Umesh. He's the head of our cybersecurity task force. He's the head of Cyber Houston, well-connected in the tech community. He organized 300. He cut it off at 300 volunteers that he pulled from that community to go into the HISD schools. And so within literally, I think about half the time we thought it would take, they had gone through all that equipment, figured out what worked, what didn't work, figured out what needed to be done to help bring those schools back. So it's just one of many stories, but I think a place where just connecting the business community and its desire to serve with people who had a need and the capability to kind of receive that support. Much of Houston's back and up and running. The whole feeling of the partnership is we want everyone to get back to normal. An economy, it's kind of like restarting a refinery, which may not be a great example right now since we're restarting refineries, but it's a complex thing to get an economy working again. You almost have to get everybody leaning in the same direction for the economy to really get going. So this is, our message to everyone is let's get going. We have an event this Friday. Let me look at my notes here to get the... Oh, yeah. Where did I do with that? Well, Indra Nooyi. You know who Indra Nooyi is? She's the CEO of Pepsi. A superstar in many, many respects. But we had an event scheduled, and we said it's for this Friday. Of course, we scheduled it weeks ago. We had the usual discussion of do we have it, do we not have it? And we said, no, we've got to have it because we're signaling to everyone that Houston is back to business. We can't keep deferring things. When you defer something, there's always someone who gets hurt economically, right? There's someone who is counting on that activity as a place of employment. So we're going to have it. I think we're going to have a great turnout. It's going to be a great event. This is a little bit of a shameless plug. If you haven't signed up, we can still sign up for that. But I've also said, what a great way to reward some employees that have done great things over the last few weeks. Buy a couple of seats, let people attend something. I think for any employee, she's really a cultural guru in how to run a company. I think for women employees, it's particularly great to see a female executive of her stature speaking in Houston. So think about that if you haven't already. You'll get a lot of advice today, a lot of help today offered to you. One thing I want to mention is so basic. Business and individuals have to register with the federal government if they want to receive any form of disaster relief. And the sooner you do it, most people, far and away, most have done it by now. You've seen the statistics. We're up over 500,000, I think, official registrations now with FEMA. But the way to do that is just go online at disasterassistance.gov, disasterassistance.gov. Anyone you talk to that's suffered any kind of personal damage or business damage, just ask. You have registered, right? Because everything happens after you register. Nothing happens until you register. And frankly, that also gives us the information that we need as a community to be making our request of Washington. I do want to thank Carrie Broderson. Carrie, where are you? Right there on my right. Carrie. Carrie's our VP of Events and Programs. And many of you have known Carrie for years. And you say, wait a minute, she's not VP of Events and Programs. She's this or that. Well, no, as of some months ago, Carrie became our VP of Events and Programs as we really try to elevate the strategic value, the value to you, our members, of our various events and programs. And Carrie's taken that on. So it was fantastic, Carrie, to have you in that role when we started thinking about, hey, what we could do post-hurricane. So thank you for doing that. We have a great lineup. The first panel is here on my left. We'll have others through the day. I appreciate all of you agreeing to participate. So thank you all for being here. Let me turn the floor over to our Senior VP of Research, Patrick Jankowski. I always say the man who needs no introduction in this city. He has spoken to every audience conceivable, but he's here this morning to give us a bit of an overview on the economic impact. It's kind of a level setting for today's discussion. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I want to let you know if you would like a copy of my slides, if afterwards you send me an email or you send an email to anybody on the events team, we will send you a copy of the slides. So you don't have to take pictures with your iPhones or take real extensive notes, but we will make the slides available to you. So let's go ahead and, before we get started, I want to let you know we do have a web page up with some disaster information. As I said, we have the easiest web address in the world, remember, houston.org. And you can go to the disaster recovery resources and you'll find information about Hurricane Harvey and the recovery from Harvey there. So just want to let you know that's one resource we have available to you. So to get started, I just want to put this in context. What you see is 12-month employment slide. It shows the number of jobs created over the previous 12 months, and you can see how strong the economy was in 2014. You can see how we bottomed out in August of last year, and you start to see the recovery. So Harvey hit us right as we were getting into the real strength of our recovery. You can also see it here in the Purchasing Managers Index, PMI. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. It's a survey of the purchasing managers out there who are buying stuff to meet the orders that they have on the books. Whenever the green line is above the red line, that's a sign Houston's economy is expanding. Whenever it's below the red line, that's a sign of short-term contraction. And so you can see we were below the red line for 21 months. We went above the red line back in October last year. And so as Harvey came, as the hurricane, I guess I should say, as the hurricane came to Houston, hit Houston, we were in a strong recovery, or we were right in our recovery mode. And then Harvey hit. It's one of the freeways leading into downtown. We tend to think of hurricanes as spirals, as pinwheels. And it spins around that little circle, the eye, as it moves on shore. In this case, it's probably better to think of Harvey more as a water wheel, because the center was stationary or moved so slowly that allowed the water wheel to turn. It went along the Gulf Coast. Along the coast, it turned. It scooped water out of the Gulf of Mexico and dropped it back on Texas. And it scooped more water out of the Gulf of Mexico and then drop it back on Texas. So rather than spinning and moving on shore as a pinwheel, it worked more like a water wheel, just constantly lifting water out of the Gulf and putting it on Texas and on Houston. You can kind of see it in the path right there, where you can see it went in inland towards the hill country, turned and came back out, and Harvey actually made 2 landfalls. And that's one of the reasons why we had so much water, such high water accumulation. You can see just the extent to which Harvey blanketed southeast Texas. Gives you some idea if the same sort of rainfall occurred over New England. You could see how it would engulf Massachusetts and significant parts of Philadelphia, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, and so forth there. So this gives you an idea somewhat the amount of rain that fell. This is from the official weather station. You can see Cedar Bayou, which is up in the northeast, which is where the chemical plants are, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Pasadena, Friendswood, First Colony, and so forth. The numbers up there, but they just look like numbers up there. I want to do something to give you some context, put those numbers in context. it'll show up in construction employment. The energy impact on energy prices is already beginning to fade as more refineries come back online. They're getting more product into the market. And so we will start to see energy prices slip just a little bit. We're lucky we did not see the dollar increase in fuel that some people expected. We saw 30 to 40 cents increase, and that's already starting to slip. And there's no significant impact to long-term population growth. There's going to obviously be discussions about where we build and how we build and what we build. But Houston still has a vibrant economy. People relocate here for employment primarily. As long as the economy continues to go, people are going to come here for the jobs. We might see a little bit of slowing, but we're not going to see any dramatic impact on population growth. And there's not going to be the long-term impact on real estate itself, though it's still to be determined. Because right now we're still in the recovery mode. We're still getting the adjusters out there to look at the property, still determining what the extent of the values are. The discussion about how we develop or what we develop is something which will take place in the future months. But the big thing is really it's not been a significant impact on the business infrastructure. I mean, the port is open and operating now. Both airports are up and operating now. The chemical plants are coming back online. Most of the refineries are back online. So we're slowly coming back online. So the Texas Medical Center did not flood the way it did during Tropical Storm Allison. So the infrastructure is pretty much intact, coming back online. So we're not going to see a significant long-term impact on the economy. This is my last slide. Did anybody see the New Yorker cover that came out last week? When you first look at this, your immediate reaction might be, oh God, another cover showing Houston flooded. But that's not what this is. This is actually the New Yorker paying homage to Houston, because if you look at that, it's people rescuing each other in the truck. Okay, but you need to look at, it's a classic Texas two-tone truck. It's half red and half white. But look at the clothing of the people who are being rescued. They're wearing blue clothing. And if you look real closely, if you can see this on the cover, it's a very diverse group, both in the truck and in the boat. And if you look at the background, you can see that's in theory the Houston skyline, but don't you see something that looks like two towers kind of rising up out of the background? And pick up on the date on the cover. It's September 11th. And when they wrote about this, they said that the artist singled out moments of grace as inspiration for this week's cover. I mean, it's incredible. I never thought someone from New York would say anything nice about Houston. They didn't say it, they drew it. And as Bob talked to, I think we showed the world, we did a real good job of showing the world how we rescue each other. Now we need to take it to the next stage and show how we recover and rebuild. So at that point, I'm done. Thank you very much. And I have some work to do at home, so I'm taking this back. So.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you also for Bob Harvey coming in and giving some introductions for us this morning. So I want to go through a little bit of what today's schedule is going to look like, and starting off by just introducing myself again, Carrie Broderson with the Events and Programs Department at the Greater Houston Partnership. And what we do is really to help our member companies and companies in Houston develop, whether that's leadership development, professional development, or business development. So we're here obviously to help you with the business development piece and the business growth piece today. For today, it's really a three component event. We have the panel presentations, of which we're going to introduce our first one in just a couple of minutes. And we have 3 of those today on various topics that, quite frankly, you all selected. We pulled the information from a survey that we conducted right after the storm happened. And these are some of the areas that were of most importance. We also have a Q&A session or breakout sessions, which happen on kind of the other side of the room here. So what will happen with our topical presentations is our speakers will come up and give some information. There won't be any Q&A at that time, but right after the panel is over, we'll move into 4 topical areas on financial assistance, temporary office, office needs, temporary staffing, workforce needs, and legal and insurance. And in that area, you can ask questions in a smaller group setting. And also we have our Business Expo, which is outside of the doors here. And I want to thank our Expo participants. They're here to tell you about services that they have available that they can provide to you and provide you with information as well. And I want to thank them also for providing lunch today for everyone. So thank you to that. So a little bit of light housekeeping. I think everybody knows at this point that we are being live streamed today. But not the entire day, just our panel presentations. So we are actually have an in-studio audience, which are you all, and then we have an online audience as well. For those that are in the live audience, for you all today, please take note of those cameras, and if you could just try to avoid walking right in front of them, we can kind of exit off to the left or to the right here, and Casey's in the back to help guide you. But you also have the ability to you've got networking that takes place at the live event, the Business Expo. You can gather information, you can ask questions, which our online audience doesn't necessarily get to do. But for the live and digital audience, you can obtain the information from the panel sessions and Patrick's presentation afterwards, because we will archive the live stream. As mentioned, please hold all questions until the breakout sessions. There won't be any Q&A with the panelists during the presentation. That'll be coming up in just a moment. Today's event is the first of a three-part. We have 3 workshops. Today is on recovery and rebuilding, so kind of more of your immediate needs. Next week, next Tuesday, we have a workshop on managing your reputation during a crisis. And so this is really going to be talking more about marketing. It's going to talk about crisis communications and corporate giving. And I know a lot of us are out there trying to figure out how to help, where to help, and that will be an opportunity to hear from those that are doing that. And then workshop 3 will be on October 3rd, and that is more about business development and growth, because even in a time like this, there actually are growth opportunities, and we'll be talking a little bit more about new markets, exporting, as well as just in general what you need to know about growth areas. And as Patrick mentioned, we have a resource guide. You can pick up the flyer in the back. Actually, it's on the outside where the check-in